When it comes to old school drag cars and drag racing action, one of my favorite events to go to every year is the Wally Parks Nostalgia Nationals. Now this was previously known as the NHRA Hot Rod Reunion. This event has been held in Bowling Green, Kentucky for more than 20 years now, and it's one of my favorite things that me and my dad go to. It's on Father's Day weekend every year, and you can just count on it being full of vintage race cars. My dad and I went up to Bowling Green just on Thursday, just for the day, and we got to get a little taste of it. Didn't get to spend the whole weekend, but that's okay. We got to see some really good stuff, and I wanted to show you some of my favorite creations here. Now this is just barely scratching the surface of this event. If you want to watch more content from the Nostalgia Nationals, you can go back and look at my video from last year. I covered a lot of great cars that were on hand then. Or you can go to Throttle Power. He always goes to the Nostalgia Nationals and he does a great job covering the entire event. You won't be disappointed with his coverage. Our first stop at the Nostalgia Nationals is always at the swap meet because we're always looking for that next best deal. And even though we rarely find anything that's within our price range, there's always a lot of good stuff to look at, including some vintage race cars. Now this 1970 Plymouth Duster says right here it's been a drag car its whole life. Based out of the state of Texas. It looks like it's really solid. It's got a kind of an old school stripe paint job. It's got those Firestone 1432s with some big slotted mags on the back. And you can see back here they filled in the taillight panel. Not sure what it had for an engine. It doesn't have one now, but it looks like a good car to put back together and race again. Now here's one I've been wanting to see for a long time. This is a Lindwood Dragster. Now we own a Lindwood Dragster, but it's not anything like this one. This one is an incredible piece. Just look at the machinery here. This is a Chrysler Hemi. You can see those marine valve covers. Just so many great speed parts on this thing. It's got a big polish blower. It's got an Isky blower drive. This thing has got lots of great period correct components on it. And it's built to reflect a 1960 build year. So it's got a 4-port Hillborn setup on it. It's got a custom aluminum scoop. It's got a magneto. It's got all the right stuff for 1960, including that really short wheelbase. This was very common in 1960 to have about a 100-inch wheelbase. And this car has steel wheels with big gussets because they've been split and widened. Now this particular car is the Joe Tucci Lindwood Welding Special. This is a car that was campaigned in 1960 and it ran all over the country. This was a gas-powered dragster. This is not a nitro-burning dragster originally, but it is now. This is a Cackle Fest type car. Now this car has an early Ford banjo-style rear end. You can see that early version of the butterfly steering wheel. It's just made out of round tubing. You can also see that cast aluminum dash that's holding those two gauges. It says Linwood Welding. Notice there's no D. That's actually correct for the car. It's just a work of art, and it really is cool to see because I have studied these Lindwoods for so long because we've got an old Lindwood chassis. You know, it's really kind of hitting close to home to see this car and see how well it's executed and how well it's restored, because I'd love to do something similar with our Lindwood chassis. While I was making laps around that Lindwood, this really cool hot rod pickup pulled up, and I've seen this thing at the Hot Rod Reunion, Nostalgia Nationals, whatever you want to call it. I've seen it here in Bowling Green several times, and it always gets my attention. This little hot rod pickup truck has got a killer small block Chevy in the back of it, stack injection, magneto, cool Corvette fin valve covers that they've cut the fins off of. It's just a really neat piece. Next up is a Plymouth Duster funny car called the Super Duster. Now this car is a tribute to Billy Grooms, who grew up drag racing in the 60s and 70s, and Billy ended up getting in the driver's seat of this car because the original owner, Gary Henderson, broke his foot, and Billy stepped in to fill in driving for him, and he ended up touring this car with the Coca-Cola Cavalcade of Stars and match races and all sorts of big races back in the day. But unfortunately, Billy ended up passing away in 1974 due to a crash at US 30. So this car has been recreated in an absolutely beautiful restoration. You can see the hand lettering, the gold leaf lettering. This is a spectacular restoration. Anytime you see a 427 single overhead cam engine, you got to take a good close look at it. And this one is an excellent example. You can see blower injector hat is polished to the max. It's got magnesium valve covers on it, and they've patinaed a little bit, but the rest of this thing is absolutely flawless. You can see the vintage paint job white wall slicks. It's got slots on the back, the little chute pack body, just a really great combination of parts on this one. Next up is another front engine dragster, this time an outstanding restoration of the Spirit. This was a AA fuel dragster, meaning it ran on nitromethane back in the day. The beautiful bodywork on this car is made out of aluminum, and it's a Hanna body, which that is top notch, the best in the business. And you can see some great paint work on this car, great chrome, great polished aluminum pieces. A lot of good stuff on this car. The lettering is right on point, lots of good shading, lots of good everything on this car. As far as the appearance package is concerned, this thing is right on the money. It's got a big 4-hole Hilborn setup on top of the blower. Lots of good pieces here on this Hemi combination, and you can just see lots and lots of great details on this car. A little bit of upholstery work, parachute on the back, period correct tires and wheels on the back. Perfect setup on this car. Showmanship was a big part of the drag racing culture in the 1960s, and those see-through trailers was part of the deal. Along with the trailer, the car itself is pretty amazing. You can see this one doesn't have any bodywork on it, on the front side anyways, but it's a very clean, very nicely detailed car. Of course, we've got a blown and injected Hemi. They've got a little cover over that Hilborn hat. This thing's got a Krager blower drive on the front of it. And you can see on the bodywork there, it says Hustlers, Donovan, Pesic, and Lucas. And this car's got a great look to it. Excellent roll cage design. You know, some of these things had some funky looking cages. This one's got a great 3-point cage. Got a little wood grain butterfly steering wheel. Lots of lettering on the back there. The patina on the magnesium wheels is perfect. This is another excellent example of a mid-60s front engine dragster. This is the Doug's Headers Corvair Funny Car, and this thing has a spectacular paint job on it. The sun was just absolutely making this dance. You can see that lettering, you can see the candy orange and the different paint effects on this thing, the gold magnesium wheels. This car is just unbelievably well detailed, and Paul Brown takes very good care of it and hauls this thing all around the country, putting it on display for everybody who loves old drag cars. Now, this car doesn't have any historical significance, but I wanted to show you guys this crazy, crazy paint job on this thing. This car has undoubtedly thousands of hours of paint work, and just look at the details. The lettering itself is cool enough, but the stripes and the details just, I mean, you can't stop looking at this thing. And the details get even crazier when you start looking at the wheels, even things like inside of the cockpit. There are so many custom painted details, candy colors, airbrush work, pinstriping work, metal turned work. This car has every trick in the book. Here's another great paint job, this time on the Rat Poison Fuel Altered. And they've got the body off of this thing, and it was out in the sun. I just couldn't walk past it without taking a quick video of it. My buddy Jeremy Fogelman painted this car, and it is right on the money. Great colors, great stripes, just a great combination for a retro 60s style fuel altered. Up next is a 1970 Dodge Challenger, and this one's pretty significant. This is Dick Landy's Superstock D Hemi Challenger, and this thing is restored very, very nicely. You can see the paint quality is really nice. It's got the original Firestone slicks on it, the Firestone front runners, Krager Super Trick wheels. It's sitting perfect. It looks just like it would have come right out of the 1970s. And according to the information with the car, this was actually the last E-body car that Dick Landy drove. And this thing was running well into the 70s, and it was actually the class winner at the 1974 NHRA Gator Nationals in Gainesville. This car is a record holder and certainly a memorable piece of Mopar racing history. Now here's a really cool 1940 Willys pickup that has got the ultimate gasser stance. It's got magnesium wheels, little tiny Pirelli front runner tires, pie crust slicks on the back, and it's got some great lettering, which the lettering is actually modern on this vehicle. This has been done recently by Brandon Bowling, and you can see some really high quality stuff here. This looks just like it came straight out of the 60s, and this truck was in fact built in the 1960s by the three guys that are listed on the door. It was based out of Queens, New York, and it's got a pretty cool engine combination. It's a 475 cubic inch Oldsmobile engine in this thing. This truck's got a lot of cool pieces on it. I love the little shorty bed with the little fenders, the threaded pipe for the back bumper. All this stuff is just super cool. I don't know if this thing is actually functional yet, but it looks like it's not far off. So really neat piece. A lot of history here. Even though this thing didn't set records, it doesn't look like that it was raced all that often, but it's still got that history of those three guys who got together on this thing back in the early 60s. Now personally, I love sleepers and I love patina, and this car combines the two of those perfectly. This is a two-door post Bel Air, and quick look in there, nothing real special, but you look under the hood, you got a big block Chevrolet, aluminum intake, headers. This thing probably hits a pretty good lick, probably runs pretty good, but it looks like just a crusty old Chevrolet, so I love it. Speaking of crusty old Chevrolets, look at the paint on this 55 Chevy. Now, this thing's got a cool gasser look to it. You can see the back hasn't been cut out, the quarters haven't been radiused, but look at the lettering on this thing. The Jolly Convincer. The orange paint's kind of flaking off on this thing, but it's got a really good look to it. I love the stance. I'm not real sure what's under the hood, but I do see a Hurst 4-speed shifter sticking up out of the floor. This thing's got a cool look. Of course, the Krager's works on it, the little scoop on the hood. Another really good combination of parts. When it comes to hot rods, I love simple and clean, and this little Model A coupe is just right. It's got a Hemi with 4 2-barrel carburetors on it, nice little details, slick little white paint job, Firestone dirt track tires. It's got a chop top, a good stance, and this guy drives it everywhere. My buddy Jason and I always talk about the lack of 6-cylinder Camaros out there, and I finally found one. This one's got 250 badges on it, but look at this on the back of it. This is really the thing that got my attention. This is a really cool single axle trailer with a home-built front engine dragster on it. And the closer you get to it, the more cool stuff you see. And that includes a Crosley 4-cylinder engine, a little tiny engine. You can't even understand how small this is. And an even smaller supercharger on it. I don't know what the supercharger came off of. I don't know what all is done to the engine as far as internals, but this thing's gotta be a lot of fun, even if it doesn't make a lot of horsepower. And it's always neat to see an old car pulling a trailer with a dragster on it. And it just helps that this one is a really nice 69 Camaro with a 6-cylinder in it. Here's another hot rod, another Model A, this time a 28-29 Roadster. And look under the hood of this thing. It's got a Mercury flathead V8, and somebody's put a somewhat modern supercharger on this thing, and it's got those 2 carburetors sitting off to the side. This thing's got Culver City Halibran wheels on it with the 6-pin knockoffs. It's got Excelsior tires on it. It's got a quick change rear end in the back. This thing is just filled with vintage speed parts, and it has a really good stance and good overall look to it. And you gotta love that JP Special lettering on the unpainted hood. Now, I typically like gassers to be a little more rough around the edges than this car, but this is the quintessential 1960s show car. You can see inside of there, it's got a chrome roll bar in it. The interior is absolutely flawless. The paint on this car, everything on it is great. Tunnel ram 2.4s, velocity stacks, chrome headers dumping out of the fender wells, Kragers. The slicks are perfect. The radius wheel wells are perfect. This thing is just straight out of the 1960s. Now, I'll be the first to admit I don't do a lot of van content on my channel, but this one got my attention. You can see already it's got some custom paint work. It's got a lot of custom interior work. And according to the documentation in there, this thing is pretty legit as far as its history. This thing's been around a long time, and it underwent a very significant restoration. And look at the back here. It's got the heart cut out, Wild at Heart on the pillow there. It's got buttons. It's got all of the 70s tricks that you could imagine. It's got the heart-shaped window, the paint job, the lettering. Everything about this thing screams 1970s, especially when you back up and you see the side pipes, the Krager wheels, the white letter tires. This 48 Austin was sitting in the show and shine area, and I noticed it was for sale. It's a pretty basic 350 small block Chevy engine, but the body on this thing is in really great shape. It's a steel body and doors with a fiberglass tilting front end, and it's got some really nice paint work on it, some cool stripes, and a good looking set of Halibran wheels on it with some regular street tires. This thing could be good for the street, but you could also make it a pretty cool looking period correct gasser if you change just a few pieces on it. Now, this is a down and dirty hot rod. This thing is in bare metal. It's a 33 or 34 Ford 5-window coupe, and it's heavily chopped. No windows in it whatsoever. It's got a louvered roof insert. It's got a pretty basic looking flathead V8 in there, but let's just look at this body on this thing. The stance, it's got skinny 18-inch wheels on it with bi-ply tires, motorcycle tires up front. It's got a Culver City Halibran quick change under the back with a nice little pan underneath that's cut out where you can see that quick change. And I just love that it's rough around the edges and the guy's driving it anyways. If you saw the video about my newest project, the Henry J. Gasser, then you know I'm up here looking for ideas at the Nostalgia Nationals. And this one's got a great stance. It's got a nice little scoop on it, fender well headers. It's got a lot of good details that I'd like to kind of carry into my car. Mine may never be this slick, probably won't have all this lettering on it, but this is a really good example of a 60s style Henry J. Gasser. I hope you enjoyed following along with me to look at some of my favorite vehicles at the Nostalgia Nationals in Bowling Green. Thank you for watching.